Right, welcome everyone to the Greater Boca Raton Beach and Park District regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners, May 16th at 5:15. Joanne, can we get a roll call?
Ernst,
Here.
Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Rollins, Commissioner Vogelsang, and Commissioner Wright.
Here. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Nope. Public requests. Well, we might have some online as well. All right. And you have 5 minutes.
My name is David Bracknell. I live at 1025 Southwest 5th Street, Boca Raton. And I'm here to advocate for a disc golf course in Sugar Sand Park. I brought a presentation. And it's a quick presentation. I timed it at 4 minutes. There you go. We happen to technical. Okay. There's audio on here for you all at home, but you probably won't be able to hear it. So just please read through it as we do the presentation. Left, right. No.
No, you're fine.
Okay, here we go. This is showing you what disc golf is all about. This is a wooded course, which would be somewhat what it would look like at Sugar Sand too. He throws a disc through a small tunnel to try to get into the basket. And here's when you get closer to the basket, you just want to throw it, and it's just like regular golf. That's the end of the presentation. I wanted to thank Craig and Melissa for coming out on their Saturday to go walk the course with us, or the park with us. They seemed very excited about it. I'm very excited about it. Not just because I'm a disc golf player, but I've lived here 35 years, 36 years now, and I really think it would benefit the community and people would get excited about it. One thing we noticed, I've got the survey. They gave me a copy of the survey. It's from November 1995. I believe we're going to need to get a new survey done, and I was hoping to get that on the agenda or somehow so that we can get a new survey done so that we can really see what the park, the lines of the park, so you have different tracks and stuff in it. Once we have the updated survey, we can discuss location options for disc golf course layout. The park is divided into different tracks that have different use requirements, so we might need to get opinion on that. Okay, and right before I came here, as a coincidence, the course designer called up and they said they could come in and do a scope of the project. It would cost about $4,000. I know that's quite early for that now, but that's something to keep in on the forefront, because this guy's one of the top ones in the world, and they could tell us yay or nay on how good the course could be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody online that wants to? No.
Good evening, Harold. Please unmute, state your name and address. You have 5 minutes.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, this is Harold Chaffee, 6200 Northwest 2nd Avenue. I'm the president of Keep Golf in Boca. I was just curious to find out if there's any new news with Miller Lake as far as, getting grants, or maybe having any information on 3 Ps. If there's anybody that made a presentation or wanted to make a presentation or had an idea or something that they wanted to do on the property. I mean, it's been quiet. I haven't heard anything. So I'm just curious to find out what's going on, if anybody knows. All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Harold? No other hands raised. Okay, we need to do approval of the minutes, of the previous board meeting held on April 18th. Approve.
Ernst, Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Rollins, Commissioner Vogelsang, Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion.
Okay, regular business, number 1, the grant writer recommendation.
Commissioners, on page 6 of your agenda packets is a memo highlighting the process that we've gone through to solicit a grant writer for the district. Tonight, we have Lisa Mulhall here from INREM Solutions. They were the organization that did respond to our proposal for a grant writer for the district. Lisa's here to answer any questions you may have. And tonight, we do not have an agreement. I'm recommending that we negotiate an agreement with INREM Solutions, but again, Ms. Mulhall is here to answer any questions that you may have. If you would like to take the microphone up there and just state your name and address into the record.
Hello, my name is Lisa Mulhall. I'm with INREM Solutions. My address is 875 Aurelia Street in Boca Raton, Florida.
Does anybody have any questions?
I mean, Lisa, and for everybody's information, I've experienced her 2 wonderful sons as top soccer buddies, and they were amazing. And Lisa and I talked about that. So when we have so many different properties, how would you go about breaking down like Ocean Strand versus Boca Chica? How would you go about obtaining these grants?
Well, I think the best thing to do first would be sit down and talk with staff or with some of the commissioners about what each of the properties are, what the amenities are on each piece of property, and then compare that to the available grant programs. There really are only, there's a finite number of recreational grants that are out there. And so we need to look at each one of those, make sure, first of all, that a special taxing district can be an eligible applicant, but assuming that, then we match up which park will be the most competitive for any particular program, or alternatively, which one you have the construction plans to work on next, because these take about a year to you apply, and then it's about a year until you hear if you've even been funded. So you want to line them up appropriately so that it matches with your construction schedule. So it's sitting down and understanding the big picture for the district. It is not a complicated process. You have a set number of properties and just walk through all of them and understand them. Of course, the first program that we'll probably look at is FERDAP in the fall, the Florida Recreation Development Assistance Program. And that one does best with a large number of recreational amenities. So if you have a very passive park, it's not really the appropriate program for FERDAP. So we look at things like that to determine what's the best park to apply and in what time schedule.
Hear that the federal government's giving all free money out. Is there any program for trails and pickleball and all that? What insight do you have as far as that goes?
Well, of course, there's no such thing as free money, but the federal government gives money to Parks and Recreation through something called Land and Water Assistance Program. And that one comes through the state of Florida, and it is not funded every year. But the wonderful thing about it is the last time it opened, it gave $1 million to the parks that received funding. So it is significant. It is also a lot of work, I'll tell you that up front. But we'll look at each one of those and see how the Land and Water gives points for different things than FERDAP does. So obviously, if you're on water or use water, you do better in the Land and Water program. Federal government also gives money for trails. We'll just look at each one of those and see what is most appropriate. I don't think there's any surprise money coming from the CARES Act or anything like that towards recreation. If they put money into recreation, it would probably be through an existing program. So there'd just be more available than normal.
Bob?
Thank you for coming today. The question that was mentioned in the letter from our executive director, you have a well-documented history of providing grant writing services to local municipalities with track record of results. Could you share with us one or two examples of the grant writing and the results that you accomplished for another municipality, especially if they're in the area of recreation? But if not, I'd just like to hear a little bit of your background.
Sure. Well, I'll just, give you a brief summary. I first came to Florida and was a practicing attorney and was working in local municipal law, and then stopped that and started doing grant writing, which was about 28 years ago. Since then, INREM Solutions has really predominantly worked for local municipalities doing grant writing. So there's a 28-year track record. Parks and Rec is always a very strong grant program. It's one that, I should say, it's one that cities always want to pursue. So even though the state doesn't always fund that type of grant, we are writing those almost every year. And I will say in the last 5 years, I think we have had the grant applications in the top 5 for FERDAP 3 times out of the last 5 years. The other years, may not have been funded, something like that. But it's a program that we know very well, and that we've gotten, to answer your question specifically, we've gotten FERDAP grants for the city of Dania Beach, for the city of Miramar, for Hallandale Beach. and other local municipalities in Broward, mostly in Broward County. Oh, and also we got a land and water for $1 million for the city of Doral last year.
Thank you. Are there any issues that we should be aware of when we're applying for a grant in terms of what quid pro quo might exist between the people who provide the grant and with us, and what we may be required to?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
The land and water, for example, requires you to put a restriction on the property. So, you get $1 million, but there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through and restrictions that you place on the property for, I believe, 50 years. I don't believe it's in perpetuity. I'd have to go back and look, but it's something that you really have to consider before you accept that funding, because even though if you have a 600-acre park and you're only developing 200 acres of it, land and water requires the restriction to go on the entire property. And so, it's just something you need to think about before executing those agreements. And there are other examples of that as you get into the application.
Well, those are things that, of course, would rely upon you to, help us get through those, because we wouldn't want to get ourselves boxed in like you were just describing to, preserve something for 50 years. I mean, we have a palette of 212 acres that we're looking at where there might be some opportunities there for some recreational grants, but I'd want to be careful about anything that we agreed to. And with the grant, I know there comes some strings, so we'll need some help in sorting through those.
Right. That's right.
Thanks again for coming down to talk with us. On the subject of restrictions, could you give us an example of what kind of restrictions you've come across in land use in order to get a federal grant, such as the one you just talked about?
Off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly what the restriction is from land and water, but it's it limits the uses that you can have on the site. It certainly limits transferring the property. But when I say uses, it limits it, of course, to recreation, but it may even limit it further to a very specific kind of recreation. So I don't want to answer this too much off the top of my head because I don't have full recall right now, but it's a detail that we would have to go through very closely, before deciding to apply for land and water. And the trails grants also have restrictions, not quite as onerous, but similar.
Okay. Also, are there grants, say, for the operation of a property that subject to certain parameters would automatically renew on an annual basis?
No, not that I'm aware of. I don't know of anything that renews annually. You have to apply every year.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And operation grants are challenging too. You're mostly looking at construction grants.
Okay. Thank you.
One last question. So you're saying that we need to have a master plan for each of these parks prior to looking for grants?
I don't know that it has to be as formal as a master plan. Well, you need a site plan, knowing
Right.
where everything's going, but yes.
We need to know what amenities we're having on the property before
Absolutely.
we go for a grant.
Yeah. and-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Somebody want to,
I will, but one last question for you. Do you go to any private foundations? Because we do have a number of private foundations that are funding a lot of events, as you're probably aware of in Boca. Do you pursue any of those?
Sure.
things?
Our company does that. We are very familiar with private foundations. The closer you are to that money and the better relationship you have to it, the better your opportunity is to possibly get funding. But there are so many private foundations in Palm Beach County. It's a very generous community, but there are also great demands on those foundations, and they are very specific about how they want to give away their donations. Some don't even accept applications. So it's not quite as easy as you think to get that private money.
I'd like to make the motion recommending that we accept InReam Solutions as the winning bidder of the RFP and allow the district staff to pursue a negotiated contract.
Just like to amend it to put a cap not to exceed $25,000 as per our executive director's suggestion in her memo.
Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Rollins, Commissioner Vogelsang, Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Two on the regular business is the Ocean Strand discussion. Brian?
Hey, Commissioners, on page 7 of your agenda packets, there's a brief memo about the Perk Your Park campaign, which I emailed to each of you. Back in the beginning of March, I had the opportunity, found out about this competition for Perk Your Park. On a whim, I wrote up an application, submitted it, did not anticipate hearing back, but here we are. We've been selected as one of the park projects that can compete for this $75,000. Part of this competition and part of obtaining that, they also give you a $2,000 grant towards marketing for this project, for this competition, which takes place in August and September. So on page 8 is an MOU regarding the two. This encompasses the use of that $2,000 for marketing. And so on Friday, we met with Chuck King, who would help us, assist us with this marketing. And we checked off the boxes that, yeah, these are things that we could do. I've spoken with Jacob and also with Sam as far as the legal wording here. We made some changes and amended some of the language in this agreement and sent it back to NRPA. The question that we're dealing with is that this agreement has to be approved by May 31st, which is before our next meeting. And so while we're waiting to hear back from NRPA, and there may be other changes that we need to make along the way, tonight I'm just seeking, I guess, approval or authorization for myself and our legal counsel to work out an agreement to accept the $2,000 grant money, if we can get to that. If not, then we will come back and update the board with that. But we'd like the opportunity to negotiate an agreement and approve the agreement prior to our next meeting.
I move that we authorize the executive director to go ahead along with our attorney and submit the application and whatever updates, take care of whatever updates come to be.
Madam Chair, thank you for the time and attention here. Just for the record, the document before you reflects our suggested proposed changes. The document that Brianne initially had, we modified. This is a clean version of our recommendations. We hope that as if and when this evening you take action to approve this MOU as proposed, et cetera, we'll share the documentation with the grantor and work from that perspective. But this document reflects our recommended changes, including, for example, applying Florida law versus Virginia law and other components that were in need of suggested changes. But we'll work towards that end based on the motion given. Thank you.
I'm supportive, but I want a question for the team is, if for some reason they don't accept the changes that Sam's proposed, can we still proceed? And I mean, it's just, this is an agreement for $2,000, or is it an agreement to enter the contest?
Response, because I asked that question, the initial response was, we think you can still compete in the competition. Because I said, if we can't agree on this 2,000, the thing is that when you accept the 75,000, there's another MOU. So we've asked to take a look at that too, just to make sure. But the thing with the 2,000 is that it has to be approved by May 31st. So I wanted to get what we had amended in front of you tonight to look at and go from there. But I think the goal would be to compete even if we don't get the 2,000. And initially the idea was that, yes, we would be able to still.
Madam Chair, if I may quickly, for example, under paragraph 5, which talks about limits of liability, We have added language with regard to the limitations of liability for a public entity, public agency under state statute. This paragraph reflects our suggestion. The way that the paragraph was drafted was it was basically an unconditional limitation, unconditional indemnification by this agency for them, which we wouldn't recommend. As we proceed with good faith conversations with the grantor, we'll work towards figuring out the best answer. But for example, paragraph 5 reflects the limitation under Florida law. So we don't open up an exposure door that's not currently legally open, things like that. But at the end of the day, hopefully they'll understand that we are in Florida, not in Virginia. There may be some nuances to this document that frankly make better sense for the agency. But at the end of the day, there will be some business decisions that we will hopefully, with your authority, avoid liability, but recognize the impact of the business decision as well.
I do recommend going forward, given time is of the essence, but I would suggest that our esteemed chairperson, Aaron, if there's any business decision part of it that you participate in, if you want to waive something or they don't agree to it,
We'd
between the
appreciate that,
three
by
of
the
you,
way.
you all
Thank
agree
you.
upon it.
That would give us the comfort that we're not operating in the dark either, by the way.
There's other agencies in Florida that were selected to compete. So I think I think that there'll be other amendments to other agreements along the way. So I think they're used to seeing some of this happen as we go through, but it's a good opportunity. It would pay for, if we were able to win the money, it would pay for a quarter of the project. So it's a good funding source.
Susie?
Once we are able to go on social media and advertise this as, for Ocean Strand, or are we allowed to personally use our social media to, encourage the public? Yes, sir.
The answer is yes, with the limitation realizing that once you transist from public to private, but dealing with the public's business on a private Facebook or other social media page, you've opened up the door to public scrutiny. So be mindful that if another commissioner engages in a similar exchange, that you want to be careful and mindful not to have a sunshine law issued by exchanging information because of social media and because it's your private social media, whether it's Facebook or some other platform. So just be mindful, be thoughtful.
As a note too, like I had discussed with Brianne that she's going to talk with the city and see if they'd be willing to share as much as possible on their platforms as well. Economic development, things like that. So hopefully, and then if you guys have any contact with city council members or anything like that, mention it to them as well, so that they can share it as well. As many people as possible. I'm not on social media, so I won't be sharing anything, but as much as we can get it out there, the more chance that we have of getting votes. So
As a point of clarification, the sunshine law would therefore affect or prevent us from sharing this announcement, say from if it was on Bob's Facebook page and I shared it off of his Facebook page to mine, that would be a violation.
Not necessarily. If I may respond, Madam Chair. If you replicate from his Facebook page to yours, that's simply putting out there in the public eye what has now become a public domain issue, no
Mhm.
longer private, because once you expose a public issue in a private social media page or otherwise, it becomes open to public scrutiny. The difference would be if you're exchanging the social media exchange with Bob saying something about the project or about something coming before the board, you just want to be thoughtful and careful not to expose that exchange. It's like reply to all. You don't want to do that in your emails either from that
Right.
perspective. I think caution is the better answer. There's a question being raised as to how to approach it differently or better. Pick up the phone, call me, email me, whatever it takes to answer. But there's nothing wrong with promoting your public issue in that forum, in a social media forum, because it gets you better coverage, as the case may be. Just be thoughtful that exchanging with third parties, including your colleagues, becomes a potential issue.
Okay, thanks.
Not terminal, just potential.
Okay.
you have a second? Susie was a second. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Commissioner Engel? Commissioner Rollins? Yeah. Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes.
Commissioner Wright? Motion passes.
Okay, number 3, the carousel RFP recommendation.
Sure. Let me take a deep breath on this one. We put out the RFP for the carousel. We had put out an RFP for both doing the repairs and also an ongoing maintenance. We were looking for an ongoing maintenance proposal from any companies who wanted to do this. Turns out that finding the companies that have the time and are willing to work on rides on a contractual basis is very difficult. We put this out to a lot of different firms. We got 0 bids back in some. So we reached out. MCE is the company that previously worked on the carousel, identified these issues. They are willing and are able to come here in June with their team. They put together a proposal. The total is $125,000. And that is for 21 days. We could possibly get this done sooner. They kind of worked in some scheduling in case there's rain and things like that that happen. But tonight we're looking for approval. We'd like to get this done so we can get the carousel open this summer. It would probably be later in July before the carousel gets open, but it would be open and we will have to go back out and re-strategize the ongoing maintenance of the carousel. But I think I detailed everything on page 17 with how we got here and why we're here and what we're looking to do. I know the public is anxious to see the carousel get back open. We will have all the parts here in June, and they are willing and able to come in that time frame to fix it.
Okay, yeah.
For clarification, the carousel was installed when?
2005, it actually came during Hurricane Wilma.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been here a good long time and
Yes.
it's a treasured part of the community. And it has been, maintained, but not as to the standard of that we'd like it to be maintained at. And so we went out when we were notified that we should get someone else to maintain it. We found someone else to maintain it. We've ordered the parts and the parts cost how much?
Phone was off. We spent about 40,000 on parts. We've only put the deposits. We're waiting to receive we're waiting to receive those parts before we pay the final cost on them.
Parts is roughly 80,000. And you submitted it out to bid. It's a very specialized piece of equipment and not many people work on it. And no one responded to the RFP. But you do have one individual who was involved in it initially who is willing to come in and do the work. And how much did you say that would cost?
It's 125,000 and a lot of that is travel expenses for their team. It's about a 5-person team. They're traveling in from different parts of the state and different parts of the country. They would come here, do the work. They get it done.
And then, okay, so they'll come in and they'll replace all the parts and do all the work. And then how good is it long for? Will they show us how to maintain it?
They can. We need to get somebody on a maintenance contract of some sort. A lot of these places like the zoo and other places that have certain rides, they have people on staff. And we've talked about that. I think as staff, Melissa and I need to sit down and really strategize, because if we go out and we create a position, let's say we want to fund a position, there's a lot of things to think about. It doesn't seem like we have a full-time position out there. So is it going to be very difficult to find a part-time person? And there's also not a lot of people with this specialized set of skills doing this work. There's fewer and fewer places with these types of rides. Although Joanne tells me that the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line has a couple on their cruise ship, so we could seek those people as well. But we need to strategize the ongoing maintenance of it. We have staff out there, the ride operators, they can identify certain things and certainly fix minor issues that we've done along the way. But long-term, we need a more comprehensive maintenance plan. So we have to go back to the drawing board on that and try to maybe put together another RFP or solicit somebody else that's willing to work part-time as a part-time employee or something along those lines.
Well, I'll tell you what, I suggest we go forward with it because it's been down long enough and it's kind of hard to have a toy that no one can play with. So, but I would suggest that possibly we work with them to see if they can help. Maybe if we hire Chuck King to do YouTube videos of just what they're doing, just monitor some of the activities, the key things for how to maintain it, how to change certain parts and keep it on a YouTube video. It would be very helpful to kind of store as a record for anyone who has to come behind this later. And then we'll get to a deeper plan, but just having that might help quite a bit.
Of the parts that are being replaced. Like,
More important parts.
yeah,
I mean, we're not
okay.
replacing any horses, but these are the poles that connect it all together. So that.
Right, so it'll give us a good
It's a-
while before it needs.
Yes,
Okay,
gearboxes, all that stuff. I mean, we haven't had any major problems with this carousel for
17 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a long time to be outside and. Wow.
Madam Chair, didn't we talk about having someone that if we got him under contract, to come do routine maintenance? Don't I remember that?
That was part of the RFP and nobody responded to it.
Nobody responded to that at all.
Correct.
What about these individuals? Do they have someone that could?
We can talk to them about that tonight. We just wanted to get approval for getting because they're scheduled for this. As far as their scheduling goes, we have to talk to them more about what they're doing locally and if they're, how it would work into an ongoing maintenance plan if we wanted to continue with them.
Yeah, and I think, Craig was right. We do need to have some documented history about what needs to be maintained. There's, I'm sure in this kind of a operation with gears and things that those things do wear out. And, there should be some benchmarks that we have for regular maintenance to replace things that necessary. And I think if these were the only people that responded, then this is probably the people we need to work out some kind of long-term agreement for maintenance after we get the facility restored. So I'm supportive of this.
Mentioned that we put down deposits for parts. Do we have an idea of what the final cost for those parts would be?
It's going to be under 80,000 for everything. I mean, these people will have to put some fasteners and things like that, but it's parts wise, it's much less than we thought it was than we anticipated.
Assuming 80,000 for the parts, we're looking at a total cost of roughly 205,000. Okay.
You do.
Yeah.
Or you want to do it, Bob?
I'll second your motion, Greg.
Okay, I make a motion to proceed with the vendor MCE Services to pursue repair for the carousel.
Second.
Ernst? Commissioner Engel? Commissioner Rollins? Commissioner Vogelsang? Commissioner Wright? Motion passes.
Madam Chair, if I just can quickly, two things. If you can authorize by separate motion, trying to solicit a maintenance agreement, that would be part of tonight's request of the board. I think it'd be useful given the conversation because as if and when the installation occurs and the activities of the motion occur, you're going to need to have something in the context of maintenance. And I think that's consistent with and compatible with the motion. If you can authorize that, that would be also compatible with the main motion.
A motion to explore a maintenance contract for the carousel.
I was going to suggest we need to add the fixed amount of 125,000 to the last motion too, or up to. Is that too late?
We'll amend the previous motion to add up to 125,000.
If the maker and the seconder don't disagree that the cap should be 125, that would be, the minutes can reflect that, Madam Chair.
Okay, does anybody disagree? No. Okay, so that'll be reflected in the first motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then I'll second the second motion of Susan's, which is to,
Mhm.
pursue a service agreement with the same vendor.
Right. And any discussion on that? Nope. Joanne?
Commissioner Engel? Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang? Commissioner Wright? Motion passes.
To number 4, Executive Director Contract Amendment. Sam.
In the backup under at page 21, given the discussions of the board at the last meeting, we have prepared an amendment to the contract reflecting Brianne's employment with the organization, which adjusts the salary under paragraph 5.1 with a base salary of $135,000, given the decisions made by the board at the last meeting. This simply is a recap and a recapitulation of what was agreed to by the board at the last meeting. You agreed to the salary modification. This document simply reflects the intention. Under paragraph 5.2, as there is in the current agreement, an adjustment of 3% COLA each year, if possible, under the terms of section 5.2. and the balance of of the contract regarding vacation, sick time, et cetera, has been preserved and accrued except during the executive director's tenure as the executive director. Those are the three components that were discussed, but the salary component in particular was approved at the last meeting. This is simply a written confirmation of that conclusion reached by the board. I'm happy to answer questions.
Bob,
Madam Chair, item number 5.2 refers to an annual cost of living percentage increase. And I assume that was in the original contract, Sam?
That's correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I would like to suggest to you that in as much as we made a significant adjustment already in this fiscal year, is that this be deferred until January 1, 2024. I feel like that, the increase in the annual salary was certainly justified. If for no other reason, the fact that Brienne's, is excellent in her position and was well deserving of that. But I just feel like we should probably think about that cost of living adjustment be deferred to begin January 1, 2024.
Sure, I agree with that because we're,
Okay.
well, the reason I say that is that we went, Sam came back with a market range. And so we went to the low and a high. Now there, there is no exact perspective, but I kind of got out of the low end was 145, was it? And so when we went through this discussion, I was really thinking, that we should be a path to at least get in the range. And so I was thinking that we should, get to the low end of the range at some point, some time. The way this reads, it's kind of, you're locked in and it starts at 135 with the 3%. So I was kind of thinking that we were going to get to 145 over a couple of years at least, and then, it not be so tight on the boundaries of 3% or anything. It depends on what the projects are, what the scopes is, give the board some level of flexibility. That if there needs to be an adjustment in pay, there should be. But I'm trying to get it more in range. That was my thought. I don't know if that's what you guys want to do.
Well, not every business has annual cost of living increases. I don't know what the city does, and it's really not relevant, I guess, in my opinion here. There is an annual evaluation period where we're going to evaluate Brienne's performance annually. Is that not correct?
That's in the
That's
current
what-
agreement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So it would seem to me that, that would be, to me, would be where you would take care of any cost of living adjustment as well as any performance increase. Just my thought.
living increases, they do. I know firefighters do. So go ahead, Steve.
Just to put this in a little bit of context here, we're talking about $4,000 roughly. And with that in mind, on an annual basis, and question here is, do we start it in 2023 or do we start it in 2024? Whenever the evaluations come up, that increase will be taken into account as already done. But I feel that until we have the evaluation in light of our current economic environment, I think Brienne deserves a little modicum of protection, even though this really is, doesn't really approach the level of price increases that we're seeing. And going forward, I agree with Craig. We have to have, I think Brienne deserves to be close to that or at least the lower end of the spectrum. So, I don't see where there would be a problem with starting it in 2023 or 2024. We're not talking about a lot of money, and it's, a little bit of insurance for somebody that's really doing a great job and, really putting herself out there for the benefit of the district.
Just for clarification, this increase that was originally granted was, a midterm increase, and we went from, what was our level that we were at before we went to 135? 111.
12, 111.
Okay. Just saying, I think that's, I don't want to do anything that's inappropriate for somebody who's performed very wonderfully for our district. But I just feel like that, we made a considerable adjustment already. And I just want to be physically responsible in this, not only to Brianne, but also to the people who are paying our taxes. That's all.
Brianne, are you comfortable with this discussion?
The whole discussion.
I know.
I appreciate all the positive comments. I appreciate the pay increase. If I'm happy to do and agree to the amendment that Bob has made. It's, as far as the evaluation process goes, I think I've talked to most of you. The thought process was to reach back out to other special districts, get an idea of how their directors are being evaluated, put together a policy. It's not going to happen in the next 2 weeks because we have a lot of stuff coming up with the budget, but get that memorialized sometime in the next couple months with the help of Sam and come back to the board and have that process in place. So I personally, I think what Steve was saying is that we changed this to 2024. There's a cost of living built in. I'm more comfortable with having a cost of living built in. And then any additional money that you would like to give me along the way as part of the evaluation process makes sense to me.
Just, I remember, and maybe everybody else doesn't remember, we had a situation with when Maddie retired, and I don't want the burden to be on the taxpayers. I want everything to be, like as we go and not have anything accumulated, any benefits accumulated, if that's possible. I think you're worth every penny. Every time I talk to you, it's always productive and it's always on time. You always call back or text back, and you're doing an unbelievable job for somebody who was thrust into this without a lot of preparation. So we appreciate your work.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the First Amendment to the employment agreement as presented this evening.
I had one comment, actually. If we would have hired from outside, we probably would have hired somebody at the lower end of the pay range. And that's where I think of it, because she's been in the position for 2 years. And I do think she should have been at the higher end of the pay or the lower end, closer to the lower end. So I agree with Craig and Steve on this one, that all three of those should be included. That's my opinion on this. And I think the cost of living is an important thing, especially with what's happening with the economy. So do we have a second on Bob's?
Then Bob's, maybe that's the way to go.
If he has a
I
second.
didn't, the motion I had was to endorse the agreement that we have in front of us without any changes.
As drafted.
I didn't make any change at all.
Correct, as prepared. Correct.
I had seconded.
Second, okay. Craig, did you have anything else?
I get it. It's an uncomfortable discussion, but I agree wholeheartedly. If you're going out to hire someone, you would probably hire someone and that would be the end of the market range. That's nowhere near some of the city staffs on a managerial level. But, it's in the ballpark. It's a healthy number. Here's my suggestion. Take it what you have here, but over the next 2 years, add one paragraph that says you may opt to increase it an additional 5,000 over the next 2 years. So she comes into the lower end of the market range.
my motion. But, you know, I think those are something that contractually we can do along the way, Craig, without putting in a specific figure in it, because we may want to do more. So.
Yeah,
you
like
know,
when we do the
Right,
reviews.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So.
That's fine. Maybe is it too tight? Then the question is really to Sam, is that, is the current contract allowing us to do that? Or is this kind of saying it's this plus 3% a year, period? That's what I want.
Oh, I hear you.
May I respond, Madam Chair, to the commissioner? There are three bullet points here: 5.1, 5.2, 5.3. 5.1 confirms the base salary that you all agreed to at the last commission meeting. Number two is effective January 1 of 2023, there shall be a 3% increase for COLA, for cost of living, not 2%, not 4%, but 3%. And thirdly, the issue of accruals in connection with vacation and sick time while serving as the assistant were transited to becoming the director's position. So those three bullets are givens. They're not modifiable. If you agree to those terms, you've amended the contract to reflect them. If you would choose to modify them in any way, you'd have to make that motion now, or modify the current motion on the table.
Well, I was just gonna say 5.4 then states the district and the executive director agree that the executive director should not be entitled to any compensation or payment except for the compensation set forth in this agreement.
That's correct.
So do we need to amend this paragraph then?
This contract, the employment agreement with these components and the prior agreement as it amends is this is the business transaction between you as the employer and Brianne as the employee. So 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and the prior agreement under 5.4 basis, that's what she's being paid, a base salary plus the accruals plus the 3% per year. And if you choose to have a different approach, that's up to you how you want to.
So where would the annual evaluation come in so that we could tie that into an annual salary review, Sam? That we would
I
need.
don't have the base contract in front of me, but I know that essentially the board has the ability to, there's no cap on that issue. There's, as I recall, Brian, there's no limitation on the increase in salary.
No, I think the concern is that 5.4 looks like there is, but in 5.1, it talks about the next annual
Correct.
performance review. It just doesn't tie it to any increase in salary.
Right.
So
Correct.
maybe something can be added to 5.4 that says, aside from annual performance reviews or something.
I mean, if it's the intent, if I may, Madam Chair, if it's the intent of the board to reward the director during the annual review for excellent performance, then there's a basis to do that. You control that decision in your own hands as a majority. If we would choose to modify section 5.4 to better clarify that, the answer is you hold that authority, but I can certainly make an effort to change 5.4 to reflect that any increases would be conditioned upon your annual review, essentially.
Yeah, I would certainly think that's appropriate to do that, you know, we don't want to lock it in and say, this is it.
Right.
We want to have the opportunity to, as Craig said, to move her up in accordance with comparable positions in other special districts and management positions. So
Okay.
that's,
If I may quickly, you may decide hypothetically in a year that you want to keep the salary the same. You may decide you would choose to increase it, but without a limitation, whether it be 3%, 5%, or something in between. You get to make that decision, but if it'll give you more flexibility to modify 5.4, we can do that.
Okay. So did you want to add that, amend your motion to include that?
I would, if I might, to amend that proviso to indicate that the board would annually evaluate the salary and in line with a performance evaluation. Does that sound all right?
Saying though, Bob, she's going to have a base salary. There's going to be the 3% increase.
Right.
And what you're really talking about is at the board's discretion, we may provide a bonus. Call it that based on performance.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it a bonus. I would say that, you know, because a bonus just means that her base salary is set and we're just paying her
Right.
a performance bonus.
An increase in salary based on.
But
performance.
I was looking at more of an increase in salary rather than just a bonus. I mean, it all comes out on the W-2 the same way.
Right.
You know, the gross revenue, I mean, gross payroll, but I think we should probably, from what I was hearing, is that we should not lock her into the base salary of 135, but we want to
Have the
have the flexibility to provide an increase to move her along the way based upon her performance evaluation.
Madam Chair, if I can.
Yes.
Yep.
Consistent with your conversation, should you, for example, in 3 years hence, decide that in that year, you prefer to give a bonus for performance as opposed to an increase to base salary? There's nothing in the document that would limit you from doing so.
And we could do, actually, in my office, we'll do both,
Or
give somebody
both,
an
that's correct.
increase and also a bonus
Absolutely.
for an extra job
Correct.
well done. And that bonus is not locked in, so that next year you may not get that same bonus.
The bonus doesn't go to base. The bonus is separate and distinct from the base salary
correct.
modification.
Correct, right.
And are we clear on that motion?
May I help you, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I mean, the motion is basically to approve the amendment as prepared with a modification of section 5.4 to include language to the extent that it is subject to the annual review of the Board of Commissioners from time to time. So that would mean that that's the language we'd add to the provision so that the board every year can make a decision to modify or increase the salary without violating the contract. Which you make that decision. You're not locked in, is what I'm saying.
That's what we're looking
Okay.
for.
If 5.4 is a lock, which was not the primary intent of it, it would reopen the door to allow you to have that discretion in future years to make other decisions.
That's what we want, is the flexibility to do that. We don't
Yes.
want to be locked in at that base of 135
Right.
and depend upon bonuses to get her to the next level.
Correct.
Right. Okay, do we have a second?
Second, well, no, Susie second.
After the amendment, don't we have to have a re-second or no?
After the amendment.
Okay, Joanne.
Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Rollins, Commissioner Vogelsang, Commissioner Wright? Yes. Motion passes.
Okay, on to number 5, District Council Contract Amendment. Also Sam.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, during our assistance to Commissioner Ernst and to the board in reviewing the salary issues for the executive director, we came across our own contract, which we learned had technically expired unbeknownst to us. Through the creative and thoughtful negotiations with Commissioner Ernst back in the day when our contract was first signed, it was his preference to have a term and have it renewable from time to time by the board. Having said that, when we realized that we had a challenge in the context of the expiration, not that ethically we could walk away, nor would we ever choose to do that. We conferred with Commissioner Ernst, and the contract before you amends the existing agreement in paragraph 8 to do one thing. It basically says that our contract is an ongoing contract subject to your decision to either continue our employment relationship and conditioned upon the budget, which we have with many of our government agencies, which is you control our existence. We essentially serve at your will and pleasure. In fact, Commissioner Ernst was very clear about it. If you look at line 4, the client may discharge a law firm at any time. There's no time frame. There's no specifics. The ethics of the Florida bar says that to the extent that you want to keep us, you keep us. If you choose to have another decision made, you can choose otherwise. What this contract basically does is it just says that there's an annual budget for legal expenses and such. We would honor that request of the board and that the contract is ongoing until you change it otherwise. And that's what we discussed with Commissioner Ernst and with the board. We propose that to you to see the under paragraph 8.
Make a motion to approve the contract, but I also want to say that we're not going to go through that whole bonus discussion with Sam. So
No.
it's been pre-negotiated and
No.
he's given us a very good agreement. And I also want to thank him for the years of service that he has provided, both Sam and Jake, the whole team, because honestly, it's been a very, very well done. So we really appreciate the legal advice and all the work. And some of it has been unexpected, from
Yes.
evictions to, all over the board, and you guys, your team has covered everything. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Yes, you did. Yes. Okay, discussion? Joanne?
Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Rollins,
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes, and thank the whole team.
Commissioner Wright? Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you all very, very much for your confidence, your friendship, and again, I say this multiply whenever I'm sitting here with you, the civility which you have, which you may not see in other venues, but I see it here, and it is priceless. I must tell you that. And for the people that you serve and your constituents that are served by your efforts and that of our director and staff, it is bar none a very, very fine and precious relationship, and we thank you for that very much. Thank you.
Okay, and our final regular business, the strategic planning and communication.
Commissioners, there's no items in your agenda packet on this topic, but this item was added to the agenda. One of our commissioners asked to add it. And we spoke to the chair, so it was added on. One of the things that came up at the city workshop last week was a comment. There was an update by the deputy city manager on the city's strategic plan, which has always included our partnership with the city. So there was an update given, and they briefed the city council on the Miller Lake process and made the comment that they felt that they still hadn't been included in the process, even though that we had each council member interviewed. I know Michael Calvert met with them, another golf course staff had met with them. So Aaron and I had the opportunity to meet with Mike Wika on Friday to discuss the tower. We did ask about this, and the comment that came up was that we had opted not to pursue a rec services master plan with the city and instead went ahead and did our own thing at Ocean Breeze. And I think there's this idea that we're just out here doing our own thing and not partnering with the city. But when it comes to the master plan process, that was submitted in the budget originally last year over the course of the summer. We were planning our discussions, and at one point we had taken certain things out of the budget along the way. The city had taken certain things out. I emailed Michael Calvert on August 26th as we were preparing our upcoming meetings with the chair. And I said, is the master plan still in the city's budget? And he responded saying that the city manager had pulled the master planning item from the budget. And that is why this board never actually discussed that master plan. So it wasn't that this board rejected the idea of doing a master plan. We actually never discussed it because it was taken out of the budget. I think in general, I know I personally would support a master plan for all of rec services because I think that's important as we move forward and talk about things like a disc golf course or other things that have come up along the way. I think that that's an important thing to do. But the reason, just to clarify, the reason we didn't do the city's master plan is that the information we got was that the city was no longer interested in doing it. And another thing that came up was, Commissioner Ernst had a conversation with somebody that said they were upset that we just went and did our own thing with pickleball at Patch Reef. But again, along the way, we had a joint meeting, and the city manager stated that he would have all the facilities, he would have somebody evaluate all the facilities and find out where the best fit is for pickleball. And when I reached back out to the city the following September, because we thought it would be done in August, they stated that the National Pickleball people had actually reached out to them. They decided it wasn't going to work at their new country club. And that was when this board was talking about putting pickleball out at Boca Chica on those tennis courts out there. So then when it came time for this board to discuss putting pickleball out at Patch Reef, I did reach out to the city again. And I said, number one, do you see this as any competition towards anything you're doing? Because we're not privy to what they're doing at the Boca Country Club. So I wanted to make sure we're not competing with anything they're doing. I wanted to make sure that there was staff support. And I received emails back saying that it was not, in fact, competing with anything the city was doing and that they were actually supportive of the process. So as far as the communication goes, I feel like we're communicating with staff. I'm not sure what's happening or where the disconnect is happening. That's making some people think that we're not getting that information or we're not saying that stuff. But I wanted to clarify those things. They have their strategic planning sessions coming up May 31st and June 1st. We're always a discussion topic. There's several things that impact us. They may last year they discussed extending the CRA for till 2035. Obviously, that's a big impact to our budget. So there's things that we should be involved with and listen to and pay attention to. And I just wanted to make this board aware. And I also wanted to clarify some of those things that are being miscommunicated out there and just state like we have communicated with city staff. We've done our due diligence, I feel, in a lot of those things where they're saying that we're just kind of off there doing our own thing. So, and I think Commissioner Ernst wanted to add this to the agenda, so I don't know if you want to weigh in at this point.
I have one comment real quick. The discussion that we had with Mike was really, really good and it was very productive. And we did discuss the possibility of doing like because we're always unaware of what they're doing and they're always unaware of what we're doing. So I feel like if there was a master plan done for the parks, we can say, oh, well, phase 2 is coming at this year of the master plan. We would know. And we'd have an idea on what's going to be there so that we can plan what we want to do and they can plan what they want to do. We did get an idea of the Boca Country Club. They are having a designer, I guess, for the tennis courts. They are keeping some tennis courts and they are putting a few pickleball courts out there as well. But they're keeping everything else pretty much the same. They're not having the pool. But they are trying to figure out what to do with the facility itself and what planning, what programs and stuff can be done in there. So, I mean, we can't really go back and go backwards and say Miller Lake, okay, pause, we want to do a master plan and then plan Ocean Breeze. So I said, well, we're going to go ahead with our master planning for Ocean Breeze because, we don't want to wait any longer on that. But maybe that can be incorporated into a larger master plan that can be done for the entire city so that we know what's going to be going where and when, because it makes sense for us to all be working together on this, I feel like. And then I would like to volunteer myself to go to the strategic planning session and kind of do here we are again and say, we're here. This is kind of what we're doing. This is how we're communicating with you. What can we do better from your side of things? And maybe we can volunteer some information to them on what they can do better in terms of communicating. Because I feel like coming from the horse's mouth to all of them would be a good thing. Because a lot of times, it's like that game of telephone, with so many different people and the two entities, the communication gets lost in translation, I feel like a lot of times. And that seems to be what's happening with a lot of information. There's got to be a way to figure it out. So I'd like to volunteer to go and talk to them, if that would be okay with you all. Okay, good.
Be supportive of the communication. And Aaron, I'll quote you since you said it takes two-way communication. When I brought this up before, I think the good news is we all recognize there is some form of a communication issue there. And I'm not sure it's really going away. I got on this board, with the support of the then mayor, suggesting it and starting at a strategic planning meeting, which I've gone to for many years in advance, just seeing what's going on and their constant complaint about the beach and park districts doing their own thing. And I got on this board, and the one thing I did was I tried to make sure we told them or let them know what we're doing, and just get feedback and information of what we're getting. Through this process, I have to honestly say, maybe I just got more frustrated with it, it's like being on a homeowner's board. It's thankless, and it gets to be a little bit frustrating and tiring. Because if I open the door for someone, going into an office building or at a Publix, whatever it is, I'm not doing that with no expectation. I expect that person to at least say thank you. And I got to tell you, from this viewpoint, I don't think we've got many thank yous. We got no one here from the city, and we've got no feedback from the city on different things. And so I was a little bit more than displeased with that meeting at the workshop. And I'll tell you why, for two reasons. Number one, the city attorney jumped in and wanted to end a conversation to say it was a quasi judicial matter. Someone has to answer to me, what is the quasi judicial matter that you can't talk openly, transparently, and honestly about a question of sugar sand or gumbo limbo? Very simple question about the tower. So I hope we'll cover that in the comments, because I honestly never expected, and I never would have brought a donor to the table to say, let's help out with something that was under construction and then gets bogged down in a bureaucracy of stuff. I don't know what's going on. And there's just no communication. And it may be the right thing. I think it was just a matter of communicate. Tell us what you're designing, what you're doing. Allow some participation. Maybe it is. We just don't know. And what we don't know, we speculate on things. The other thing that was brought up was there's two things. And I think we need to, dispel them or call them out. Our park, our project. Okay, I've heard that multiple times. And so whose carousel project is it? Who maintained that? Is it a district park? Is it a city park? Gumbo Limbo, is it a city park? Is it a district park? Hat Tree, is it a district park? Is it a city park? For the fact is, most residents have no idea. Okay. And the reality is it's a community park. And we should all be working for the effort of the community to do the right thing. And I feel like this board has prioritized recreation, community to do the right thing, to support Dave here who wants to do something. And he's the one who volunteer who wants to do something. Support Harold Chaffee who wants to build something out at the Boca Chica area. Support the community, Greg Galanis, who's trying to advocate for golf. I think we're here for the community. And it feels like we just don't have a lot of support. And then we don't really know what the city's doing. I have to go on the website to hear about the Boca Country Club's golf course and learn what their plans are. But I know darn well it doesn't make any sense for this board to build another golf course when there's one golf course 3 miles away, but we have no idea. And we do not have the recreation director here telling us what they're planning to do, or anyone else from the city telling us what they're going to do. And that kind of just gives me a lot of concerns. And if no one else thinks there's a communication problem here, I'm sorry that I'm calling it out, because I think there's a serious communication problem here. And the reason I think it is a serious problem is because we could do so much more. Both parties could do so much more for the community in recreation if it was a priority. And if it was not looked upon as our project, our project. And so it tells me that, okay, that's your project, okay, that's fine. But what about all the other things that we agreed that we were doing together? What about the roof over at Sugar Sand? What about all the overhead that we're spending here? And we're just kind of push back these things. Here you go, you can take care of it. We spend well over $2 million a year in overhead. Okay, so my expectation is to get that call for a thank you at least, or to do something. We could do a lot better. And it's just disappointing because this is a great community, great resources, but some things you do things, in my view, better transparently, better openly, but the whole conversation about the Gumbo Limbo Tower just got shut down. And it got shut down because it's a quasi judicial matter. It got shut down because the question was an open question. Could it just be moved over to Ocean Strand? And the answer there was, well, there's a master plan already set. Hey, I want to go on record as saying I only voted on a path, not the master plan of Ocean Strand. I just thought, as you and this board did, if I go back in time, can we at least open Ocean Strand after, 20 years of being closed? It just makes no sense. At least open it. And that was the idea. And then all I hear is roadblocks. There's no parking. Oh, we can't do anything over there. We can't do this. We can't do that. We can't do this. And then we have to have, a bunch of people come in and look at it. What is this anyway? What is going on here that Boca is so unique? It's difficult for us, and we're, quote, a partner with them. So I personally don't see how we could go very far with Ocean Breeze with this kind of partnership. And that's unfortunate.
I have a question for you though. Do you have any idea where the issue lies with this? Because I've been racking my brain over the last few years trying to figure out what we can do to kind of solve the communication issues or the relationship or whatever it may be. I don't know, maybe Bob and Susie, you've been on here longer. But I'm just trying to figure out maybe some kind of solution in terms of communication. Do we need one point of contact who's a higher up above the Parks and Rec director that can communicate down to the departments that we need to deal with? I don't know, because there's so many different representatives within the city that we need to communicate with, right? So how do we have one voice from them that is communicating with us, that is giving us all the correct information? Because again, it goes back to that game of telephone. If you have multiple people, it gets lost in translation. The less people you have from one to the other, it's a much better line of communication, right? So how do we get to that point is my question.
You know that when all this came up via email, I did reach out to Brianne and I said, do you still send all the information to city council, to staff? And she responded, yes. So they, I don't have an answer to your question, but I do think that if everybody was reading their emails, they would have a better handle on what we're doing on this end for the community.
Some of the things that I would say are the communication problems are not things that I'm prepared to submit in public. Because I have I know where the issue is, and I'll share that with you privately, Aaron, because I don't want to do anything that's going to make the problem any worse. But let me just point out a couple of things. When I first got on the commission, we had staff from Parks and Rec at every meeting. And they knew what we were doing. And there wouldn't been any this discussion, well, I don't know what you're doing because you're doing your own thing, if somebody was here, because they would have heard that. And I do believe that we do a good job of getting the information over there, whether or not they're reading it or not, or whether it's getting distributed to the people who need to see that. But I go back in many of the things that where this partnership was a little frayed when, for one, the Royal Palm development, I'm not sure whether that's the correct name, the property out where the old polo fields were, that was brought into the city, but not into the district. Now, I know our enabling legislation is very specific about where we can go, and I'm not sure whether we could have gone out there, but when we asked about that, we were told the subject was off the table. I mean, it was like fee complete. We're bringing them in the city. They're going to not pay you any taxes from that community, but they're going to be able to use your facilities as residents. Okay. We inadvertently, through the Palm property appraiser, were collecting revenue from there, which we had to refund. That to me was a little embarrassing to have that situation happen. The development of DeHornley, we were handed that development when it got to the 60% completion page, and total is going to be $24 million to complete. We did it. The bid came in at 10 million with some design issues that brought it up to 14 million because they had not allowed sufficient underground utility work. While we were waiting to develop phase 2, we agreed, one, that as a part of trying to get away from this, we agreed that we would put down sports turf over at Patch Reef in return for being able to put down grass over at DeHornley. We also agreed at that point in principle that we would participate in beach renourishment other than just the part in front of Red Reef, but the entire beach, including dredging the intercoastal. In return for that, we were going to get to develop phase 2. We get the interlocal agreement back, and it was a master interlocal agreement, blending in all of the parks and taking away most of our authority to make decisions on maintenance and CIP on that park. That was not a very good example of a partnership. Yes, Brianne.
The city, we sent them 2 agreements. We sent them one for phase 2 and one for beach renourishment. Beach renourishment came back executed. They accepted us funding that fully. And then the second agreement was not for DeHornley Park. It was the master interlocal agreement.
Right. I don't think the communication is as much on our part. I thought with Brianne, with Aaron and Craig coming on the commission and their relationship with council, we'd probably have better communication. And I've been disappointed with that. Not disappointed in you guys, but disappointed in the feedback that we're getting, that we're not communicating. When we were talking, Brianne, you and I were on a phone call with Mike Weka and I forget the lady's name that was in charge of.
Chrissy Gibson.
Yeah, Chrissy Gibson. We let them know about our plans over at Patch Reef for pickleball. We're very clear about that, and there didn't seem to be any objection to that whatsoever. And I think also the pickleball people supported us being able to get the pickleball courts over at Patch Reef, and because it made sense to them. We had put 6 courts over there. Having all the pickleball in one spot was just delightful to them, and I think they supported that, and leaving the palette over at phase 2 open for more rectangular sports, or I don't know. I think they talked about beach volleyball or something over there as well. But I'm really stunned to hear you say that, what you said about, that they didn't know what we were doing, because I just don't think that's true. And I think that the partnership itself, while we spend a lot of money on operation and maintenance with the city as our partner, I think that they could do more if they were interested in anything other than our money. Then they would be a little more open with us about what they're doing. And the fact that they discontinued that recreation master plan, and they knew that, and then get criticized for us for not supporting that, which is not true, at all. I think it can be repaired, but I think there's some changes that need to take place downtown in order for that to happen. We've got new people here that support the district, and I look at our parks as community parks. People don't know the difference between, and they never have, between our park that we own at Patch Reef, or the work nobody over in the community that I know of realizes that Hornley is not a city, is a city park, and they don't realize that we support all the maintenance and built that park. I'm of the opinion, I don't care who gets credit for it, but don't discredit me in the process. And I just really believe that having somebody here from Parks and Rec, whether it's the superintendent, whether it's the director, that would do a lot toward having the city know what we do. And I think that's something we should encourage. Yes, Brianne.
Well, just for the record, Mr. Calvert's texting me, he's online, and he's assuring me that city staff is always listening to our meetings. I understand that he sends an update about our meetings to the city council. I hope that it reflects what's in our minutes, because I'm concerned about whatever information is being passed along maybe isn't clear or accurate.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Calvert saying that, but there's nothing like having his presence or somebody from his department here, so you can have an exchange other than in public request. And then when we were meeting at over at Sugar Sand, they had a place at the table. We were sitting around a big conference table, and they were at the table. So they were representing the city. We knew what they were doing, but they may not always liked our budget cutting, but we always had very good relationships with Mickey Gomez and his staff. And Mickey or Buddy or JD or someone was always there taking our message back. So we knew that was getting passed along. So Michael, if you're listening, please send somebody to our meeting so that we can have some exchange during the meeting, possibly, and have you participate in some of the discussion. And that way we know that the message is getting back to the city. And thank you for letting me monopolize the meeting. I'm sorry.
Thank you. And maybe, I don't know if it's possible, but and reciprocating that by having a representative from here be at a portion of their meetings as well, so that there can be some back and forth there as well. And then having them at our meetings to show that we're there, we're their partner.
Job.
First, Bob said a lot of what I was thinking. This has been going on for a long, long time, ever since the first thing I can remember is I was on the board maybe 5 months, and we found out through the newspapers that the July 4th celebration was being moved to Dorhornley instead of being, I think, at FAU. And it was, we were, to use your phrase, we were given a fait accompli. The disconnect has been there for a long, long time. And it really bothers me because, you know, Greg said, as Greg said, we could be doing so much more. The whole Ocean Breeze situation comes to mind. City Council was by and large for it. They gave us the bond financing we asked for. Then all of a sudden they were against it. And there were rumors floating around about their acquisition of Boca Country Club. If in fact that was the case, that they were talking to the Dell organization about acquiring it, they should have let us know. And things might have taken a whole different tack. And we wouldn't have had the acrimony and people coming in and, you know, well, we're not going to spend money, and you're doing this and you're doing that. We might have avoided all that. And the idea is, and I've said this many times, I don't care if we're the senior partner or the junior partner, or we're the junior assistant deputy partner. Okay, we're partners in this. We have the recreational needs of the residents of the Beach and Park District to take into account. And we both need to work together. So I'll say it again, whatever the city is looking for, you know, include us in. Let us know what you're thinking. You know, it's no fun being bushwhacked. And it's happened on more than one occasion. And I made myself a promise at the beginning of this term when I was elected, I would try to go easier on the city because I've been critical in the past. But, you know, this is like, no matter what we do, we're still the bad guys. And we're not trying to be bad guys. We're trying to do our jobs, and we're trying to do it with the city. So whatever the disconnect is, and there seems to be a problem between what happens here and what gets transmitted from city staff to city council. And I don't know quite why, but whatever it is, let's get to the bottom of it. If we need to sit down and have a marital counseling session where they yell at us and we yell back at them and we get everything off our chests and get down to the truth, and so be it, let's do it. But, you know, we're past the point of ridiculous already.
We'll go to strategic planning on the first day, and have my speech, and you know, have an olive branch to try to, you know, and I don't want to be critical. I don't want to put blame on anybody at this point. It's not a matter of blaming one person or the other. I just want to be clear with them to make sure that they know exactly what we've been doing, and that we want to work as a partner with them. We say that often, but this time we're going to mean it. And and I want them to be clear on that. And unfortunately, Mike Boyka is retiring, and he's leaving, I believe, at the end of July. So unfortunately, that telephone line of communication will be replaced with another. And I believe that George will probably be leaving shortly after. So we're going to have to, you know, get to know a new person that's going to take his place, who obviously will not know the history and all that kind of stuff. So, but again, I just want to be clear with them and make sure that they know exactly what we've been doing, and that we've really been putting effort out in terms of communication, and that we hope that they will do the same. So that's it. Yeah.
It's been on their agenda for, I don't know how long, you know, at least 15 years. So maybe And if you get anything out of it, they can put something quantifiable on the agenda that says how they achieve success in that, and they're measured on it. But right now, I came into this with, kind of we had to let go of our director, who was here for a long tenured time, who really shaped this district. I don't think that was the issue, and so there's too many moving parts here on this thing. Again, I go back to the opportunity is there for all of us to do so much more. And it just, so far, when statements come out in the workshop, one by 3 different people, I kind of called to question, what are we doing? And what are they doing? It just doesn't seem correct. So
Don't want to just throw our hands up in the air and say, that's it, we give up, we want to do our own thing. I don't think that's the opinion of any of us. So we just have to keep trucking ahead and try to move forward. So yeah. Roll and invoices, Craig.
here I'd like to make a recommendation for payroll and invoice approval of $1,505,847.32.
Man,
Commissioner Engel? Yes. Commissioner Rollins? Commissioner Vogelsang? Yes. Commissioner Wright? Motion passes.
reports and discussion items. Brianne.
Commissioners, on Friday, Commissioner Wright himself met with Mike Wika to discuss the tower, which was a direction that was given at the last meeting. During this discussion, we spoke with Mike Wika about the donor family and about the various problems that have occurred along over the course of the process of the tower. He's agreed to work with municipal services staff to see if a construction manager at risk who would go through the project as it's going and make some decisions along the way would be beneficial. And additionally, he's going to work with staff to develop a timeline of when they can go through the project, make some revisions to some of the bidder requirements that we discussed, and remove the part about the ADA parking lot improvements, which we approved at a previous meeting. And he'll come back and give me a time frame of when he thinks that they could have that prepared to rebid. It was recommended that they rebid this sometime in the early fall, maybe September. And of course, this will be after Mr. Wika leaves the city, but we hope that that will stay on track. And he plans to get back to me in the next 2 weeks before our next meeting in June. So my recommendation was that we put this on as an agenda item because he'll have that time frame and we can talk more about it. I think it's important to note, like, if we bid this again, there's different things to discuss as far as how often do we think about rebidding this and things like that, that we should put on as an agenda item, have a conversation so that we get this information back from the city. We're prepared to make a decision. Our annual audit is complete and there was no corrections or anything like that that we had to make. It was a positive report overall. It's been shared with the financial services director of the city. So city staff does in fact have a copy of it. It's also on our website and it's been certified by the state as well. I really want to thank Merv Timberlake and Joanne for all their assistance in coordinating with the auditor to give them the necessary documents, and of course our treasurer for making himself available for his interview and answering any questions throughout the process. We got one bid back on the Racket Center. We'll discuss that at the next meeting. And then also, as far as the school district, a brief update. I spoke with Chris Garrison. She's working on getting me copies of some of the agreements they have with cities currently. And then we're going to continue following up. I know they go to a lighter schedule during the summer, and summer for Palm Beach County is 2 weeks away. As we saw Austin was excited about today. So we'll continue to work on that and hopefully get something back in the next couple, probably not the next meeting, but maybe two meetings away from that. And then just to respond to Mr. Chaffee, as far as an update from Miller Lake, I think they clarified at their last meeting that the next step was to put together the plan based on the survey results that they shared that night. So we are going to have I'm meeting with them next week to kind of talk about that plan. And then their goal is to have a public meeting. We thought June 1st, but there's some scheduling conflicts. So we're looking at June 15th for that public meeting. And I'll email all of you about any changes with the schedule as we go along. But that's the update on that. So we haven't seen the initial master plan. We're all going to get to see that soon, and it's something to look forward to. And then future agenda items would be an insurance RFP, which we talked about doing, and I'm working to get to our insurance guru this week, so he can have plenty of time to review it. And then, of course, the Gumbo Limbo Tower discussion. Racket Center RFP. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That the Racket Center RFP will also be on the next agenda.
Quickly, if I can, at the end of April, we sent to you several legal memoranda that were asked for by the board, one of which related to firearms regulation, which we gave you the best information we could that was as current as possible. As you know, one of the speakers in the audience raised the issue about using certain kinds of weapons and killing iguanas and other type of issues. We gave you our best legal update with regard to firearms at the time. Nothing has changed. The litigation I referred you to is still pending in the Florida Supreme Court, which may be dispositive of impacts that could have some effect on people like yourselves sitting in a public capacity, and the potential fines that could be imposed for regulating beyond the state laws that currently exist. We also gave you a quick update on the investment policy, which was helped by Commissioner Ernst, which we thank you for, and the updates on the types and kinds of bonds and such that Commissioner Vogelsang had spoken to also update you on that situation. And last but not least, you may remember Mr. Cialberti had raised some questions about the deed covenants at Ocean Breeze. We actually provided him after the meeting a copy of our memo, which we stood by and stand by again today. As you may remember, we actually provided that memo back in November of 2020. That's a matter of reference, and the board's been living by that opinion, and we continue that opinion as well. To that extent, again, I want to say thank you for the extension of our contract relationship with the board. We are grateful and privileged to work as your general counsel and hope to do so for as long as you keep us as your lawyers. So thank you all very much for that.
Sam,
Thank you, ma'am.
Susie, you want to go first?
I'd like to ask if we could put disc golf, disc golf on the future agenda item, if that would be possible. Is everybody okay with that? Okay.
Just one thing. I want to know, before we go to that trouble, that we have an environmental assessment of that property, because if the scrub areas and the reserve areas are of the size that it's not permissible, I don't want to waste any time talking about it. So I think that's important that we know what the city says. And if the map that was shown here is accurate, I mean, I'm not objection. I have no objection at all, except that I know what we went through when we were building the carousel. The carousel was originally supposed to be in the northwest corner, and we moved it over to where it is today. And there was going to be a splash pad. And I think we ran into some issues over there as well. So I think it's well and fine to talk about it, but let's make sure we have our ducks in a row before we get too far down the road.
So when Addison Meisner wanted to build on the property, there were some environmental issues on the south end of the property. So we could revisit all that information too. But I just, at some point, I'd like to discuss it if it's possible. Y'all got an email from Greg Galanis. He wants to move forward, but I think you answered our question, Brianne, that in mid-June, we should be able to have more public input and input from our board as far as exactly where we're going with all the amenities for Ocean Breeze. So I just wanted to clarify that for Greg.
I just want to make sure that we stay on this tower issue and the timeframes that we get the information we need. I've kind of resolved that this is going to be a more expensive project than what we had anticipated, but I think we are obligated to get this tower built, and whether we have to increase our funds or not, whether we engineer this value engineer this down to a different cost. But I'm like Craig now. He was kind enough to bring someone to the table to help us with a donation for a very good reason, for a very good cause. And I want to see this project done. And if it costs us another $500,000, I have no opposition to it. I want to see if this is the cost and we've committed to getting it done. Let's do it in our budget. Also, I was over at Boca Country Club hitting some golf balls and for the first time in 6 months, and they've made some nice progress over there. But it's disturbing to me to see the 12 clay courts sitting over there in total disrepair and not being used. And I sure hope that they can get on that subject at some point in the future, but because I know the courts are in demand. It's like over at Swim and Racket, those courts stay busy. I believe the same thing would happen over here. And I would rather them keep them all clay courts, to be quite honest with you, and let pickleball take their course over at Patch Reef. You can always do that later if we need more demand. But, and the other thing is that I appreciate the cities working with us on netting over there at Spanish River at the Hornley Park. I've had so many people that have complained about their kids disappearing into the trees at the end of the goal. And also on the other end, where the ball goes into traffic too. And, it's a pretty heavy area traffic wise. So I would encourage the city to, Brian, keep on that project, because I'd like to see that netting up before the next season, and it'll take about that long to go through the process. And thanks for the seating that they're putting around there. Some areas where heretofore were no seating. So us old folks could sit and watch their grandkids play, or just relax as we're walking around. So I think that, one final thing, we're an open book. And I think there's no reason why we could still have this communication issue if it does exist, because we don't want that to be the case. Let's get rid of the elephant in the room and let's try to move that forward. And first step will probably be a strategic planning session, Aaron. And I know you'll represent us finally. Yeah, I know you will.
I concur with Bob's comments, and on the whole of things, there are some very good things. I don't want to take away this has been a focused discussion on communication, which is one of the toughest subjects to deal with. It's a top subject if you're hiring someone. So it's an important topic for all of us. And I just, again, feel that we can all do better on it. So thank you for taking the effort to do the strategic meeting. And I hope that it will be well received. So on that front, let's go to disc golf. I like Dave's proposal, but I guess here's a thought for you is I think we all kind of agree we need to explore it, but we need to understand what the limitations are with sugar sand. So I don't know if Brianne has to come back to us to say what are those limitations, if any or not, or how can they be moved? But then I would come back to say, are we limiting ourselves to just, sugar sand? Maybe it should be, at Ocean Strand or somewhere else, or even in Patch Reef. I think we just need to, the needs there is what I'm saying. And so it would be, to me, where does it fit the best? And if we have to move things around a little bit, maybe we make more nature preserve over at Ocean Breeze, so be it. I just want to see us, better utilize the beautiful areas of the parks that we do have. And to me, the concept that's presented is just very non-invasive. I mean, there could be a lot of worse things, just plowing over trees and doing stuff. It's a good concept that get people into nature, and wherever it fits, we need to find a home for it. But let's, maybe do a little bit more exploratory search. So the first step is, hey, tell us about sugar sand. That's where Dave, lives adjacent to and is very familiar with, and just brought that to us, but it may not fit there. I get that. Would it fit better somewhere else? And that's something I'd propose, kind of the next step of this. We just need to look across the board. Where does it fit the best? And I have no idea where that might. It might even be on a city property. So
Reef might be a possibility as well.
if you there, it's,
But I'm curious though too, like, is it a need for sure? Like, how is there like a disc golf club with like a certain number of members? Yeah, absolutely. right? Is that okay with you?
He's gonna overwhelm you with it. Yes.
Well, I'm just curious because it's difficult when you have one person coming in and saying, yes, we
agree.
need this, but
Okay.
do we? I want to make sure that
Right-
it's something
right
that we
now,
need.
when the disc golf community finds out that I've been here without telling them, they're going to be pissed because it's huge. There's a lot of people, but I don't want to bring anything to them until I know something can happen. Sugar Sand would be perfect for it, a wooded course. There's a course in Easterland too, but the disc golf community will take care of it once it's built. It's the disc golf community in both. I belong to one in Broward because Quiet Waters is closer to me. The closest disc golf course in Palm Beach County is West Del Rey Regional Park. Then the rest of them are way up north, Okehele and such. But the disc golf community is pretty huge. The presence on Facebook is huge too. You can look up a Palm Beach Disc Golf Association and look at their posts. There's hundreds of people. They've been around 20 years or so. They volunteer. That's how all the courses are maintained in the counties, Broward County included. I'm pretty good friends with someone who's built 4 courses already, and he's the one who turned me on to talking to one of the top designers who's fairly local, he called me today, which was out of the blue for some reason. But disc golf is pretty big. I just happen to, I'm an old surfer from way back, and I played disc golf in the 70s, and I rekindled it a couple of years ago in California. But there's plenty of people. There's plenty of people in Boca. I could fill up this room anytime you want me to with disc golf players. And most of them would be Boca residents.
My take is it's a passionate group. There's a whole-
But I agree with Bob in terms of the environmental.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, so next steps on the whole process is number one, okay, we'll look at sugar sand, look at the environmental aspects of it. Then number two, though, I'm saying, let's take it the next step to say, is that the right place? Are there other places across our, area that we can facilitate it? And whatever that is, so by the budgetary meeting that we agree or disagree, or we just come to the conclusion to allocate something for it, where we're going to land this thing or not. It's to me, I see the same reminiscence of pickleball as in disc golf, that it's really, you got a passionate group who will take it and will run with it. I think that's a good thing. So long as the community is in favor of it. Yeah, if you want to call your volunteers, call them all in and we'll see a passionate group. So not yet. He doesn't want them yet. So, but I think I believe you, Dave. And I do think that there's a community for it.
You have residents and district residents that are
Agreed.
part of the people who want the pickleball too, because that's where the money is coming from in terms of paying for this. So
So-
it's important.
Totally with it. So, okay, so that was, it's on the agenda. We're going to work on that, but it'll, the executive director will work towards it. Number two, I want to mention that someone approached me from the Little League. They just asked, what were the things that, how are things going? Number one, they said the park rangers are great. They've been very supportive, particularly at Sugar Sand and other Patch Reef. There's some very good things. They said where the opportunity was, so, and the grounds as well. You got some phenomenal fields from Don Estridge and so on. But they did highlight there's been a number of break-ins, smash and grab type break-ins at Sugar Sand specifically. And there was a concern around the lighting. Now I realize we're coming into the summer months where we'll have longer lighting, but the lighting in some of the parks goes off pretty quick, from the sense that when the game ends, it's within 5 minutes, the park lights go out, parking lots go out, lights go out. And I don't know why parking lights would ever go out. So I just asked if maybe we could follow up to make sure there's sufficient time, at least 15 minutes time from the end of a game time to shutting down the park and closing it. And the second area, though, and going about the smash and grabs, we never really hear any of this, and I don't know that we want to, but I think we should be informed of, on a frequency. If this is a high frequency, problems at our parks, wouldn't that be kind of nice to know? I mean, what's happening with it? Do we have to have additional security? Should we fund additional security? Should we do cameras? We have no gauge on that. And it ties into the insurance stuff too, because I know Bob is on it now of the things, but I like to, when there's a claim, these things fester into something bigger if they're not handled. You know, so I get it that a lot of people are short-staffed, but I'd like to make sure that from our perspective, if we're going to manage more of these things, we need to be informed, or at least the executive director informed, and say they received the notice that there were 20 break-ins this past month. I don't have any idea if there's 1 or 2 or 100. So that's it.
Oh, this has certainly been an eventful evening. I agree with Craig as far as disc golf. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't know that Sugar Sand is the venue for it, but doesn't mean we need to rule it out. Also, I just want to reiterate what I had said earlier. I will do whatever my part is to facilitate communication with city council and city staff. For the record, for members of city staff and for members of city council, if you want to call me and yell at me for something I did or didn't say, or something that you think I should be doing, or just talk to me. My phone number is on our page. Most of you, most members of staff and city council have it. I'm free. And just a note to Aaron, no, you cannot get combat pay. Yeah.
A follow-up on the smash and grabs. I think that the community also needs to be aware that they shouldn't be leaving anything in the car. I've been in contact with the head of the Rangers, John Badalaro, and he said basically the same thing. Caution everybody not to leave anything in the car, whether it's evident or not. These people sit in these parking lots and they look at the ladies who are not getting out with a handbag. And so they think, okay, she stuffed it under the seat, and that's why they're breaking in. So we also maybe should be putting up some signs not to leave your valuables. Oh, there are? Okay, well, they should, and I feel for them, you know, when they get broken into, but everybody needs to do their part.
Good. I have nothing. I will be at strategic planning. And that's it. So. Yeah,
To adjourn.
all right. Susie.
Okay. Commissioner Ernst?
Yes.
Commissioner Engel? Yes. Commissioner Rollins? Commissioner Vogelsang? And Commissioner Lee?
Yes. We are adjourned.